I think the message is that your story matters, you matter, and to encourage the listeners to really take time to reflect on your story, reflect on your journey, look at where you came from, what voids did you have in your life, and therefore what are the values that you now have.
You don't understand this pattern as you are innate, because you are innate. You are just living in the bubble. You are, of course, trying to find your balance. It is later on that you are looking back that you can see that actually there is a pattern in the life that you have lived to that point, that you can even call it a divine design almost, if you want to, depending on what is your religious inclination.
It is said that we carry the traumas of 7 generations of our ancestors within us. And so I'm aware that there's been, like in these generational healings, there was a lot of these war traumas that came up, and I had visions of war and soldiers on the ground, on the battlefield, and I had to recalibrate that so that I could integrate those it's really hard to explain actually, but there was a vision where I had to integrate them into me and free them so that a part of my being could then be freed as well and didn't have to be so stagnant and stuck. Is Germany. So I grew up in Germany, and then I moved after school. I moved to the UK actually, which is where you're based right now. And I've always had this desire to help people. I've had this innate knowing, even as a teenager, that I was here to help people. And at the time I had no idea what that would be like or how I would do that. And then initially I thought maybe through psychology, and I also I loved reading. I actually grew up without TV, so reading was my go-to place. I loved learning about realities and different perspectives and human motivations through literature, and that's what I ended up studying. So I ended up studying English literature and theatre studies in the UK, became a theatre director, and really honed my skill of reading people, honing my leadership skills, and honing my skill of getting the best out of people, all through, helping them create stories and bringing them alive on stage. Then that door closed after about 7 years, and another door opened, and I moved to Australia, where I didn't want to start from scratch again. And it's really then in my 30s that I started helping people and discovered life coaching. So I trained as a life coach and started working with women. And again, after about 8 years, that door closed, or actually 12 years, that door closed during COVID. And then another door opened, and that was the world of hybrid publishing. I was, as a life coach, I was in a multi-author book, and I loved the process so much because I felt really collaboratively working towards a common goal. I was fulfilling my love for writing, sharing stories. And when the publisher of that book said that she was training people on how to do this, I had these truth tingles, and my whole body resonated with saying, yeah, this is your next step. And that's, I followed that because I always tend to follow the guidance that I'm given, even though it didn't really make sense to me, because how was I helping people? How was I empowering people in that moment? And now what I've realized, having done this for about 3 years, is that the entrepreneurs that I work with, who are also in the, the healers and coaches, I actually do empower them. The process of writing a story and sharing their story is really helping them to embody their purpose, embody their mission in a bigger way, which means that they show up with more confidence, with more clarity, and therefore attract more clients. And it just creates this beautiful ripple effect where they're growing and they're impacting the world in a positive way. And that's what I love doing. The mission of Hill House Publishing now is to awaken and empower humanity to raise the consciousness on the planet.
That's so lovely. That's so lovely. Everything about happy people is the best thing, is the best job in the world. Because if you are only going to be happy yourself now, then you will see that you are going to fail. That is natural. But if you help people to take care of themselves, they will also help you to take care of yourself. That is a basic setup of life. I love that. I love that. Now, tell me something more. So, a little Krystal, growing up, what do you see around you?
What did I see around me? You know what? I have this memory of we didn't have a car when I was young. And so one of my earliest memories is I saw all these cars on the roads, and I was really curious, how do people get in and out of these cars? Because they were smaller than humans. And I couldn't figure it out until finally one day I saw somebody opening the door, and then I realized how they got in there. So that's one of my first memories that I have. It's like just a memory that stuck with me. It's really that curiosity and of trying to figure something out.
Tell me a bit also about the place where you grew up. Which part of Germany was this? Tell me more about that. What do you remember of also the people around you?
Yeah, I didn't have like one family home that I grew up in. In fact, until the age of 5 or 6, my parents moved about every year. I do remember, like when I was 4 years old, I've always wanted to have a sibling. I desperately wanted to have a brother or a sister that I could play with. And finally, when I was 4, I got a baby brother. And so that I do remember that very much. And it was really, really fun. I also remember kindergarten. It was really interesting. I was always very, very aware of my environment. And there was this competition at kindergarten, but they wanted us to have everything cleaned up. So they were doing a competition about and giving a prize to the person who did the best cleaning up. And so in my little Krystal brain, I was kind of scheming and thinking, okay, so how can I get the attention of the teachers so that they can see how well I can clean up? And so I took the big stills that were outside in the garden, and they belonged into the toilets. That's where they were placed. And so I had to walk through the kindergarten room where the teachers were in. And so that's what I did. I just walked back and forth, taking the stills from one place into the other. And sure enough, I won the competition, which was really interesting. I don't even know what that means, but it just means that I was kind of scheming and thinking about how can I bring attention to myself in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. And how did you feel about that competition?
Look, at the time I didn't make it mean very much, but looking back now, I'm thinking, wow, did I really? It kind of I don't know, it feels a bit scheming and a little bit like, I have to be the best. But then if I look at the underlying reason why that was so important to me is because, my baby brother was already born, and I felt like my emotional needs really weren't met in the way that I needed them. Like I'd had my mom's full attention for 4 years, and suddenly there was a little brother that took her away from me. So I think, yeah, I actually do know that. Like I felt like my needs weren't being met anymore. So I think it was a way to compensate for that. And it started a pattern. It actually started a pattern of control, and it started a pattern of becoming an overachiever, where nothing you ever do is good enough to really make you fill that inner void. And I know that a lot of people listening probably can relate to that, when we're feeling that we need to do something in order to be worthy of love, in order to be worthy of attention. So I think that's a very common pattern that I've carried through a lot of my life. And finally, a couple of years ago, like I've been working towards letting that go, and that is happening. So that, I think with us as human beings, we often have this knowing that we are innately enough. We are enough exactly how we are. We are worthy. And then there's this inner child that is always with us. In my case, this 4-year-old little Krystal who felt like her brother was taking away all of the attention of parents, that doesn't believe that. And so it's when just bringing these two together and integrating them, that's been a big part of my journey.
That's really a beautiful journey. That is a beautiful one. All right, now I'm still there. I'm still there. I like to spend some time there because it's very important. You see, Obehi Podcast is about storytelling. We really love the idea of being able to talk about where we are coming from, our past, because that eventually connects to where we are going, which is our future. And of course, it connects to where we are today also. Could you spend some time with me talking about those people who could have influenced you as you were much younger? Tell me more about that. I'm curious.
Yes, I think my dad really is the person that's influenced me the most. He was a minister in a church, and I remember, us having conversations at the dinner table. They were very philosophical, very deep, and I am somebody naturally. I love going deep. Like you're not. I love, I'm not at a dinner table like wanting to talk about the weather. I'm somebody at the dinner table, or ideally with one-on-one connections, talking about meaningful things. And so one thing I remember my dad saying to me is that nothing in this world, everything in this world has already been invented. There's nothing new that we can invent. And initially that really surprised me because, there's technology and everything is always advancing. Even if I, as a child, didn't think that way, I think what it taught me and what I really took from that is eclecticism. He said the only way that we can create is by bringing things that already exist together in a new way, or we destroy something and out of that we recycle and make something new. And I really believe that that's how I've lived my life. Like if I look at my history and all the things that I've done, they're so eclectic. And my creativity, because I am a creative at heart, my creativity really comes from putting together things that already exist in a new way. So for example, I've been a theater director. You're bringing together literature, but also this ability to bring the best out of people. Then I became a coach. And here again, this ability to bring the best out of people stayed with me. And I fine-tuned that, and I developed the understanding of human patterns. And then I became a publisher, where I'm now bringing together literature, writing with the understanding of patterns, and then bringing that together, being able to reflect back to my clients their story in a way that they may not have seen, or being able to see the arc of their story and the patterns that make up that story in a way that will then help them to create their book or their chapter.
And how do you feel about that?
How do I feel about that? I find it exciting because I do create on a daily basis. I bring things together for, I feel it excites me. I like doing that.
All right. Now, this is the last question I'm going to ask you about the place that you grew up. Then we'll move into what you do today because, like I said, I just love to do this. Now, tell me about the environment, the place. What do you remember about the place where you grew up?
It's a really difficult question because, as I said, we moved around so many times. So if you give me an age, then I can tell you what I remember about the place.
All right.
Or do you want me to pick one?
Okay, no, I want you to pick one. Pick the one that influenced you the most.
The place. So the environment of the place. That's a really interesting. Okay, so I have one. So I was between 12 and 14. We lived in Saarbrücken, which is a town at the border of France, and we lived in the same building as the church, and it's a small church called the Christian Community. So it actually was in this massive, what looked like a big mansion, in this really old house, and my family lived at the top of the house. Well, my family, my mom and my two siblings, and because there wasn't enough space in that house, I had to move down. So I had a room. I was 12, 13 years old, and I had a room, and there's this gallery. So my room was there, and then there was this gallery going around, and you looked down, and there was this big chandelier, and it was just all very, very majestic. I felt like I lived in a castle. But also what I remember about that time as well is it was quite amazing. This separation from family, this lack of support. Like I had to move out of the family home to live downstairs because there wasn't enough space. My dad's office was next to my room, but it still felt quite exposed in a way. Like I was more part of everybody, the people from the community, from the church came in and out. And when I went out of my room, I was straight away in a public place. So I didn't have that kind of closeness and that. There's a word in German called Hille. It's like, this embrace of privacy. And I was also separated from my family, which again, in many respects, gave me a sense of independence. That was an advantageous characteristic, and really I became a leader, and it served me in many respects, because ultimately, even if there's negative connotations also to that, feeling separated and alone and needing to kind of prove myself to belong, it also had this positive quality of strengthening my independence. And as we know, everything always happens for a reason. So the reason was there to help me become independent, whilst also then giving me something to work towards, to come back into the sense of belonging, which is another pattern that I had to overcome, and feeling that I belong in community, not always being the outsider, which, moving into an English country, I'm an outsider because I'm a foreigner. So it's always been that way. Like, I've always seemed to have manifested that. And that's what I find so exciting about human patterns, that we keep recreating patterns in different environments that come from our childhood.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Of course, you are finding a pattern. And like Steve Jobs said in his famous speech in Stanford, you don't understand this pattern as you are innate. Because you are innate, you are just living in the bubble. You are, of course, trying to find your balance. It is later on that you are looking back that you can see that actually there is a pattern in the life that you have lived to that point, that you can even call it a divine design almost, if you want to, depending on what is your religious inclination, in that nothing actually is by accident. So based on that, say maybe you were to go back to that 12, 40 years old, and you were to relive that moment, what would you do differently?
It's a good question. I think it was really, it just was, like, I didn't question it. I don't even think if I would ask my mom or my parents if there could be a way that I could stay in the family home, I would have wanted, maybe have asked for more connection, maybe spend more time upstairs and less time downstairs. But I had created my own world. I was reading a book a day, I was playing violin. So I'm not sure if I would have done anything differently, because I wasn't even aware that I was creating this pattern of being alone or isolation or not belonging. That sort of came later.
Lovely. I love that. A couple of years ago, I did a series of articles. Some of this article, okay, because then I was developing this podcast. And so I actually spent 1 year talking about the idea of self-improvement. So we look at self-improvement from very many angles. So there was this series of articles that I did that have to do with solitude. In that I would say at the point that you don't need to look at solitude as something negative, because it gives you a time to be able to reflect about your life, because you're going to have to grow up. There is no way you can grow up just being a child. Because a child doesn't really have responsibility. A child doesn't take decision. Of course, I know that to your parent, you will always be seen as a child. But your parent don't want you to always be seen as a child in your life. You are supposed to grow up and also become a parent. You're supposed to grow up and also take up bigger responsibility. You don't give bigger responsibility to children. So you need that moment to be able to reflect on your life and to ask difficult questions, even to yourself sometimes. These are some of the things that you cannot do in the bubble with other people, with ignorance, no? That maybe people are looking at a football match. That is not a place to reflect. You cannot reflect when you are in a place like that. When you are in a place like that, you do like what Napoleon Hill described as the mass psychology. That you respond to what is the psychology of the masses, because that is where you are. You don't really have that power to be able to control the masses. You are a fan. The fan have a collective idea. So I think I was really reflecting on this idea for a very long time. Actually, for over a year, I was reflecting on this. Because if we also look at different religious institutions, whether you're looking at Christianity or Islam or Buddha or African spirituality, for example, you see that there was some time that individuals, those who formed these different religious sects, they didn't always stay with the masses, the follower. From time to time, they need to retire to either the mountain, in the valley, so that they can sort of commune to their sources. This was true in the case of Muhammad. It's true certainly in the case of Jesus. It's true in many other instances in our religious institutions. In our religious life or spirituality, as you put it like that. So in that sense, for me, I think solitude is something that we need to explore because it helps us to explore the inner and also the outer. Of course, the idea became important for me because I came from Nigeria and I live in Verona. Actually, I live in Italy. That is where I'm living. So for a very long time, it was obvious for me to reflect on my life because I don't have my parents here living with me. So that is where all these things actually became very important for me. I also know that if you don't take charge of that moment, it can also ruin you because life is not just positive. It's both negative and positive. It depends on where you want to pivot to. That is what is going to control the directory that you want to go. Okay, sorry that I'm taking long to explain all this, but I just wanted to say that moment is important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And Buddha had his big realization of enlightenment under the tree as well. And I think, these days we don't spend enough time in solitude because we're always so busy doing that. It's important to remember that, being with our own company, with our own thoughts, with our own reaction, and with our own being, and just slowing down and sitting down with a cup of tea or just meditating is so important to get that next inspired action that would move us forward. Otherwise, we just stay on autopilot and keep on doing the things we think we should do rather than the things that want to move through us, right?
Thank you for that. All right, now let's talk about storytelling because you like to talk about that. And I think everybody should love storytelling because it helps us again to reflect on who we are and to share our experiences. And this again is something that I've learned because for a number of years, I've carried out a research about the presence of Africans in northern Italy. And of course, I'm still doing that today, only that it has expanded now. That is where this podcast actually was born. In that I just want to know what are people feeling that are coming from different culture, living in this culture. What is their experiences? So that is story. I will just hang my camera in front and I just ask questions. Tell me your story. And I gathered this for over 6-7 years. I published 2 books from that. I created a documentary. And that is what I still do today. I'm interested in people, in their experiences. So I'm really curious about that. Now, why are you interested in storytelling? I want to repeat that question again.
I think stories, our life stories, are the only unique thing that we have. Like nobody has our story, so that is what makes us unique. And I think in a world where so many people feel that they're comparing themselves and they're competing, especially us working with entrepreneurs, when we come back to our own story and when we can claim our own story, I feel that there's some magic that comes. And also those who are listening through the stories, I love people's stories as well. I'm intrigued by them because I learn so much about life, it expands my horizon, and it's all the different perspectives that help us to see our own lives in a different way. Often what I teach my clients is that when they share their story, their reader will actually listen to their own story. They will hear their own story reflected back to them, but from a different perspective. And that in turn then enriches us as the listener. And of course, stories were told, we are hardwired for storytelling, I feel as well, because that's how the ancient people around the campfire, that's how they imparted knowledge. That's how they what's the word? They expanded, they grew, they they learned from hindsight, and that's how evolution happened, because people shared their stories and everybody built on the experiences of their ancestors.
That is so lovely. That is so lovely. No, that is so lovely. I'm taking some time to reflect on that. Have you?
Yeah, so I gave you like so many different points there, didn't I? I was like, okay, this.
That is the beauty of it, though. I think you also said something very nice there, that when you tell story, and of course, this is something that we talk about quite often in our audio room, that when you tell story, you allow other people to have the boldness to also talk about story. That they look at you as a human being, sharing their experience, and everybody is selfish. So they're not really like cling to your story. They are cling to their story. Because you talk about your parent. You talk about, for example, before you were talking about when you were 12, 14 years. The person that is listening to you is not really like hooked to your 12, 14 years. They are hooked to their 12, 14 years because you help them to remember at 12, 14 years, what was I doing? At 12, 14 years, was I living with my parent? Was I in school? Did something happen? Now you are triggering them to tell their story. Therefore, you are helping them to also know their root. That is powerful. That is powerful. So you said when you talk to your client, you usually something to the effect that you help them to tell their story, or they feed back to you the story that you are telling them, but from their perspective. Could you explain more on that?
In the context of, so the question was like, so my clients who are sharing a story with their audience, like be it on social media, be it in a sales conversation or whatever it might be, when they're sharing their story, as you said, their reader, the listener will identify with that theme of the story, and they will have a story around that similar theme. So for example, if it's about the origin story and what they're passionate about, and say in my case, I'm really passionate about empowering people. So then you might think, oh, what am I really passionate about? What is my core thing? Oh yeah, I remember when I empowered, or oh yeah, I remember when I empowered someone. And it's the stories that help us, this know, like, and trust factor. It's the stories that help us connect human to human, which means that we can trust somebody more deeper, because we now know whether we're like them or different to them. But the other thing around that is, as I said, these common themes of empowerment or significance or loneliness, they're universal themes, and we all have stories around those themes. And me sharing my story around empowerment, which I haven't, but my story around loneliness will trigger something within you or within the reader or the listener to say, oh yeah, I have a story around that as well. I remember when I was lonely. And that creates connection.
Have you met some people, maybe within your line of business, who have told you, okay, now, because later we'll be talking about your book, your publishing, because that is also a very important part of the conversation. But was it just talking about story? Who maybe told you, I don't have a story, or I don't know what to say in terms of story. Share with me.
All the time. Yeah, no, that happens all the time. And in fact, we were debriefing today a project that I was doing. And this lady, she was saying, I didn't realize I had a story until I wrote it down. And yes, I have a life and I wrote my story, but I still didn't think I had a story. I still thought that my life is just my life. And so by her writing her story down, it made it real for her that she actually had something to say, that she actually had something unique to share with the world. And that was such a realization for her. And I think this happens to us all the time. And I think the reason why it does happen is because we're so close to ourselves. We're living with ourselves 24/7. So what we do, our unique gifts and strengths, are just completely normal to us until somebody else comes to us and said, I have no idea how you do that. You're amazing. And I will say, well, doesn't everybody know that? And so I think that happens all the time. And so we just need to remember that what comes natural to us may not come natural to somebody else. And it is in the act of storytelling that we sometimes realize that and can claim that.
All right. There was something I forgot actually when we were talking about the background, your background, no? And that also usually have to do with story. And this is something that I ask often, particularly when we are talking about the African diaspora story, because people that are being away from home for several generations, I particularly have the interest of trying to understand what they learned from their grandparents and from their grandparents to the grandparent of their grandparents. And we do this intentionally, try to stretch the line of connection and ancestral connection, if you want to put it like that. Okay, my curiosity is, did you have the time that you were sort of asking or quizzing your parents to tell you something about their old parents, so that you could sort of learn from their old grandparent who tells something about their old grandparents? Tell me something more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So my grandparents grew up in the Second World War. In fact, I do know that my grandmother's brother, he died in the Second World War, and that was something that she never got over. And in fact, as she got older, she started talking more and more about her brother and about the war. And I also, I've done a lot of ancestral work in my healing, and there's a lot of the time the war came up, and this scarcity and this need. I remember my grandparents, they had food stamps and they had to queue for hours and hours just to get a couple of potatoes to feed the family. So life was extremely hard in those days, and the pattern that got passed down from that is that my father, who grew up in this environment, then said to us, well, you need to work hard for your money so that you know to treasure it, because that is something that his parents, my grandparents, really deeply ingrained in him. And it is also something very German. There's this need to work hard, which I think why my soul wanted to move away from that, which is why I moved into different countries, and especially Australia is just such a country. They come from, the histories, they're coming from England, and they are being the rebels. So, they put like some of the prisoners came to Australia. So Australians are very free thinking and very kind of casual and fun and playful. And so that's what I needed to kind of get over this pattern of working hard that did come from, all the wars that Germany has gone through.
You see, these are deep now, and they actually are the one that connects us. These are the stories, these are the real thing about us. And this is why in storytelling, or what we're actually talking about in business storytelling, is that people are tired of the datas, the 20%, the 5%. They are looking for connection. There are over 5 billion people on the internet. Not all of them are just looking for the percentage. A lot of them are looking for the human connection. When you talk about your grandparents, how they survived in the Second World War, and that is important for people to know, because we are talking about people now. We're not just talking about the percentage. Now, you also talk about the work that you did, your ancestral healing work, something like that. Could you please expand on that? People want to understand it.
So it is said that we carry the traumas of 7 generations of our ancestors within us. And so I'm aware that there's been, like in these generational healings, there was a lot of these war traumas that came up, and I had visions of war and soldiers on the ground, on the battlefield, and I had to recalibrate that so that I could integrate those it's really hard to explain actually, but there was a vision where I had to integrate them into me and free them, so that a part of my being could then be freed as well, and didn't have to be so stagnant and stuck. It's not explaining it very well.
What was the process? Tell me, what did you do? Because, okay, now I'm asking you because there are people that are suffering from that. They are sort of held back by that. Because you talk of people having this, what they usually would call epigenetic trauma, no? Because you are not generated from the computer. You are a product of a man and a woman. And those are also product of another man and another woman. And it go on for several generations, for thousands of years. So what our ancestors suffer have the possibility of affecting us. So there are a lot of people that are suffering from this. So when you share with them how you overcame yours, they will also do the same to overcome theirs. Because you are helping people. That is what you do, right? How did you overcome yours?
So I have a better example than the one I was thinking about just then, and that's about working hard. You know, the German culture, there's this ethos that you have to work hard in order to achieve good things and make something of your life. And I think it comes also from the First and Second World War, where life was extremely hard for people. And so when I looked at this pattern within myself in order to free myself from it, what actually came up is that there was at least 7 generations have made a vow to work hard. It was almost like a code of honor that we wouldn't, that you let your ancestors down if you don't work hard. And so in order for me to free this pattern, I had to free myself and all of them from this vow of working hard. And there were, I was taken through this process by a practitioner, and we dissolved, by Hille, and she dissolved this pattern. And so all the ancestors were freed as well. If you look at it, imagine like a string that connects me from my heart to theirs, and it's like it goes forward. And then if I collapse it, then it collapses for all of them and frees them as well. And then we're doing that for our children, so they don't have to take on that pattern. Does that make sense? Did I explain that well?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense because that is what I'm seeing here. I'm hearing here. This podcast, Obehi Podcast, have a certain session of it that is dedicated to the African diaspora. There are these people who are looking for a way to heal themselves. So we really use storytelling for this, in that we understand that what our ancestors have gone through can affect us. So if we can heal ourselves, also because there is this concept, this African concept of the identity of who a person is, what is a man, what is a human being, that it goes beyond just the individual who is in front of you. That individual is connected to what has come before, what is the present, and what is the future. Therefore, you can heal yourself. By healing yourself, you are not just healing your physical being, you are healing the unborn, the generation that are going to come after you. You are also healing your ancestors, those who you are carrying their DNA. Because like I was saying before, you are not a product of a computer. You're not the product that is generated in Harvard University. You are a human being, which means that there are generations that came before you. It is because of them that you are here. If there is a trauma, they are carrying it, and you are also carrying it. If you can heal yourself, you heal them, and you also heal the generation that is going to come after you. Because the line is not supposed to end with us. So this is what many experts are sharing with me. Yes, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. What do you recommend for people to do who are maybe going through these challenges? Okay, maybe in the case of Germany, it is very evident what you are talking about, because many people know of the Second World War, even the First World War. No? Of course, it becomes important. You see, a couple of days ago, I was walking around in my city, which is Verona. This is where I live, in northern Italy. So I was seeing an event that was organized in the city center, in the front of Arena. So they were doing a symposium to sensitize people about the people that died in Germany during the war. Now, of course, they basically recreated a train track in the city, in the main city center. They put pictures there. They were giving statistics of how many people died. I think they said something to the effect of about 8,000 Italian Jews died in the war. Now, somebody might ask, but this is something that happened many years ago. Why are you still talking about it? Yes, we need to talk about it, because if we don't talk about this, we have more chances of repeating it again. And more than just repeating it again, but we also need to heal ourselves. These more than 8,000 Italians that died as Jews in Germany, they are carrying the trauma, and that trauma is transferred to the children that are living today. So this healing process is important for us. We are healing ourselves, but we are also healing generation that is going to come many, many years from now. What is your recommendation for people? Of course, we are in storytelling.
So the recommendation is to, whenever there is a pattern or something that's not going the way you want it to go in your life, to know it may not originate in your childhood, that it may actually be something that you have absorbed from your ancestors. And I go as far as saying, like, even past lives sometimes, and that's a whole other kettle of fish, and whether or not you believe in that, that's I'm not attached to that, but we're talking about ancestors here. So as we said, it goes to the ancestors. So I recommend finding somebody who either does family constellations or a healer who can work to heal their trauma that you've taken on in order to resolve. Because I think ultimately that's how it works, right? We're taking it on so that we can resolve it for them because they couldn't do it. And of course, we then don't want to pass it on to our children. Now, I already have seen that I've passed certain patterns on to my children that I'm now resolving for myself. And so I'm like, oh my God, my children are still running it. I've just deactivated it. In theory, it will deactivate for them as well, unless they've also already, brought their own, added their own story to it. And so in terms of storytelling and healing ourselves, it's really, it's important to reflect on our childhood, our life, the patterns that we recreate and the stories that are connected to them, so that we can understand them better. Like I think knowledge, we always say knowledge is power. And when we understand ourselves, it means that then we can get realizations, but it doesn't stop there. Knowing what's dysfunctional or wrong or needs healing isn't enough. We actually have to heal it as well. And it's important to get the help that is available, because there are so many modalities that have come out that can help us heal things that we've absorbed.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, the knowledge is there. The knowledge is there. There is a client of mine who does ancestral healing. I sort of create content for her, so I know what she's putting out there. This is a person of African descent. What I want to say there is that there are a lot of people out there who are willing to help other people. But the question, like you said, it's not just about knowing it. It's about doing it. You need to take action. If you don't take action, this thing is not going to work. So having the knowledge is important. Yeah, knowledge is power. No, knowledge is a potential power. The application of knowledge is the power. If you just know it, yes, you are potentially powerful. But when you apply it, then you are really powerful. All right.
Yeah, I like that. Yes.
Thank you. Now, let's talk a little bit about your coaching before we move into book publishing. So you were coaching, you were doing coaching. What were you actually coaching people about? What were you doing there?
So my area of expertise, or what I specialized in, was helping women in particular to step into their feminine essence. And again, this comes from my background of having been very much in the wounded masculine, which is all about the doing and the pushing and the controlling, to finding within myself that flow, that grace, that ease, and really helping women to step into that, because it's not something that's been modeled to us in society. So I had to find that for myself, and then I was running workshops and working one-on-one with women to help them activate their divine feminine essence, and then bring that into harmony with the divine masculine, which is not the pushing, but is more the presence, is the doing, but from this really powerful, present way that is not pushing and problem solving. So that's what I was doing, like integrating the divine masculine, the divine feminine, energies in us all, so that we can tap into both and create a life that comes from this place of creation, creating through the divine feminine and then enacting with the divine masculine, putting it into manifestation.
Mm-hmm. All right. I will ask you to explain more about this divine feminine and masculine essence. Please expand on that for us.
So you can also call it the healthy feminine and the healthy masculine. So an unhealthy feminine is that typical housewife that's nagging, that's it's a victim. And then the divine feminine is that presence that is, it's a creative energy, it's a creative essence. And men and women can both obviously have both in them. So it's that divine spark, that creative idea. When we have an idea and we just get so inspired, that's coming from the divine feminine essence. And then the healthy masculine is then the one who finds a way to put that idea into action. So for example, if I have an idea to create a book, a title, that's coming from my divine feminine, and then the action steps to go and to create the title, to write the description, and to put it out there, that's then me tapping into my divine masculine energy, just to give it a very simplistic definition.
So there is a need to mix both of them together, or to match both of them together to be able to create something. Is that what you are saying, and what you were actually passing on as a message to these people you were coaching, or how to do it?
It's more about how to embody it. So if they were in a pattern where they felt like they had to control everything and they had to do and to push in order to achieve, if it was in business, I would say, okay, let's just take this have to energy out, which is an unhealthy way, which, we talked earlier about when things have to come from our passion, from our inspiration, from our joy. The wounded masculine doesn't do that. It comes from the have to the must, or else, I'm not going to survive. So the divine feminine, she knows how to tap into that pure creative energy that is coming from the heart, that is inside the heart. She knows how to live from the heart and be in the heart. Does that make sense?
Now, when this energy, this feminine and masculine energy are perfectly high danced, what is going to be the result? I mean, show me or explain to me what life were to be if this feminine and masculine energy are properly harnessed by an individual.
There would be flow. When it's fully activated, the divine feminine creates an idea for a new program. For example, if we're talking about life coaches or people who are entrepreneurs who are creating programs, the creative spark, that excitement that comes from the divine feminine, and then the divine masculine is the one who puts it into action, who creates the funnel, and I mean that can be outsourced as well, of course, but it's just a beautiful flow where we wait for divine inspiration to strike us, and then we do something, which is then the enactment of the masculine. So we wait for the intuitive hit. Should I go to this networking meeting or not? Does it feel good? Like, that's what the feminine asks. Does it feel good to do this right now? And if it does, then I go, and then synchronicities happen, because then the divine masculine is the one who said, okay, like, we're going, and that's it then takes that into action. And so we're following the inspired action. The inspiration comes from the feminine, and the action that comes out from that inspiration is the masculine enacting that.
Mm-hmm. Masculine and feminine essence. But when we use these terms, are we looking at it from a figurative expression, or is there any way that sexual energy can be involved in the communication? If not, why are we calling it masculine and feminine essence? Help me expand on that, please.
That is a really good question. So in essence, it is just the energy of without the sexuality. Why do we call it masculine and feminine? It's about the duality, and I think I think sexuality is separate, is very separate, and I'm a little bit rusty on this, I have to say. So forgive me if I'm trying to figure it out right now myself. It feels like, so we all have feminine and we all have masculine energy within us, because there's the yin and yang. It's like in order to be whole, and it's devoid of sexual energy. And of course there is, if we're bringing the sexual energy in and we're looking at it, the feminine is the receiver and the masculine is the giver in that sense, right? If we're looking at the sexual act. And so if we're and so the woman has a vessel, a container that can hold creativity, that can birth creativity, and the masculine is more that sort of that active force that meets the world and that gives something, and that does something. So if we're taking that and making it figurative and into an energy, as beings, as humans, we hold both energies within us.
That is very interesting, but I would like you to spend a few more seconds there, okay? All right. So is it really figurative, or is actually what it is, in the sense of there is a sexual relevance in the whole conversation? I mean, is that really what it is, or is it figurative? What I mean is this. There are some animals that have actually both the feminine and the masculine reproductive organ or energy in them. So they don't need to meet the opposite sex, if you want to call it like that, to reproduce. Because the conversation is going to be very important in many areas now. So for this type of animal, when their maturity comes, they just reproduce on their own. And that is fine for them. But as us, we don't, okay, I don't want to say we don't have both, but it is going to be difficult for a man to reproduce an offspring of by itself alone. So this man needs a woman to reproduce. So I'm trying to see if that is what we are talking about here by this masculine and feminine energy in this one individual, or do we really effectively have it so that a man does not need a woman to reproduce, and a woman does not need a man to reproduce in the essence of this energy that we're talking about? I'm not clear on that.
Because energetically, so obviously, as humans, we need each other to reproduce. And yes, there are some techniques where a woman doesn't need a man to reproduce. But that's not, like, I'm talking a lot more figuratively about it, because in essence, we are everything, from an energetic perspective. If we're going big picture, we are one, that saying that we are all one, and within the one are the different aspects. And I even went as far, like, if we're going totally philosophical here, the reason why there are so many different goddesses in the ancient times, like in Greek philosophy or mythology, and in even the Latin, like the Roman goddesses and gods, apparently it is because man couldn't comprehend or describe the essence of femininity. So it had to break it up into different aspects. So then there was the goddess of war, there was the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of love, the goddess of beauty. And so it's really like that. But ultimately, they're all God or goddess. Ultimately, they're all one. And we're just teasing out the different aspects, just like we can play and tap into different roles that we're playing in any one given day. Like, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a businesswoman, I'm a friend. So they're all different aspects of my personality come to the forefront. And I think it's the same with the masculine and feminine energy. Sometimes we're energetically tapping more into a doing energy, and then other times more into a being and a creative energy. It's like the head and the heart, they're all part of our body, and yet they fulfill very different functions.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I really do. Of course, these things will need them to be explained. I know also one time I was asking one of my guests, because we're talking about spirituality at the time, and he was saying something to the effect that at the spiritual level, there is no gender, there is no male or female. Of course, there are different interpretations when it comes to that sense. But of course, talking of human being, we're talking of what we see, So sometimes there are need for this kind of explanation. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I mean, especially like at the moment, just one more thing that suddenly came to me, with the whole gender diversity these days, like where people identify in a male body, but they identify as female and vice versa. It's an expansion of that, right? It's saying that we are all one. Everything can be in the same body, and then somebody feels more one than the other, and then they want to change physically. I mean, it's fascinating, and it's a big topic.
And that can actually open up another Pandora, actually, but it's okay.
I know, I just realized that. And I was like, we probably just shouldn't do that. I'm just going to close that door again, because I'm definitely not an expert to talk about that.
All right, thank you. Now, let's talk about your book publishing. Please explain to us, what do you do in that area?
Yeah, so I call myself a hybrid publisher, which is a rather new profession, and it sits between the traditional publishing and the self-publishing. So basically what I do is I provide a professional service that is to the same standard as traditional publishing to entrepreneurs that are purpose-driven, at a service, at a fee rather. And they then in turn keep 100% of their copyright and 100% of their royalties, which they don't in traditional publishing. So who I work with in particular are what I call purpose-led entrepreneurs, those who have a mission, have a purpose, and to better the world, because as I think I said in the beginning, the mission is to elevate the consciousness on the planet and to contribute to that through stories that these authors share and through wisdom. And so I do multi-author books, and I also help authors with their own story, helping them to plan and write their own book, and then of course publish that as well for them and create a marketing plan. And every single book that we've done so far has become a #1 bestseller on Amazon.
Lovely. Okay, Krystal, I want you to tell me, why would a business need a book?
That's a really good question. I feel that these days, where there are so many fake accounts on social media and people doing a weekend workshop or weekend training and proclaim themselves to be an expert, I feel that it's really important for those who have done years and years of study and years of practicing to separate and distinguish themselves from those what I call overnight successes. Because when you write a book, you can't do that one just having done a workshop. And yes, you can potentially write a book with ChatGPT, and there's many ways of doing that, but they are not quality, and it's very, very quickly visible. So I believe a business needs a book because it helps you to really show that you have become an expert in your field. It also helps to make you more visible. I know that podcast hosts love authors that have written their own book because they know that these authors have gone through the discipline of writing a book and the discipline of really honing in on their message, and have a body of work behind them that counts for something, and it just gives you credibility.
Credibility, and that is very important for business. Okay, we talked about storytelling before, that you want to be able to connect to the audience. But when you connect to the audience, now when you say, my name is Iswai, people are going to find out, what is this Iswai? What does it really represent? Is it credible? Is it what he or she says he or she is? If you are not who you say you are, and you are going to be discrediting yourself. So yeah, I think that is really very important. That we need to be credible. We need to demonstrate that we are credible, and we need to be effectively credible in what we demonstrate, in what we show, in how we present ourselves in the world. Now, how do people really write the book with your services?
So I have a 4-month solo book incubator, and we start with the planning. So we spend a lot of time on what is your, I call it the void to value statement. So based on a quote by Dr. John DiMartini, who says that your voids create your values, we look at, I take them through a journey because I have done a lot of meditation, and being an NLP practitioner, I can take them on a journey into their unconscious to really help them identify what is the void that they've perceived in their lives, what was absent in their childhood that has created a driving force that made them strive towards the opposite. So, for example, from disempowerment to empowerment, from loneliness to connection, those themes. And once they have that, we then build the theme of the book on that, because it then really connects to them, and it answers the question of why they do what they do. And then by sharing that story, they then connect with their readers. So I make very sure that they tell a story in each chapter that demonstrates a teaching point, because as Les Brown says, never tell a story without a teaching point, and never make a teaching point without telling a story or giving an example. So I help them, craft that outline, and often they get surprised by this exercise. And I actually just started a cohort, and one lady came up with from terror to trust. And when I asked her, did you know it was terror? And she said, no, I had no idea. And so it helps them to deepen into their own story, and to a level that they hadn't even done before. So we're starting from this really deep place of understanding, and then I share with them tools of storytelling, and we go from there, and then give them the accountability and the feedback to keep going and make it a really powerful transformational book.
I like that transformation. Now we are moving somebody.
Yeah, it's got to be transformational, right?
That's great. Yeah, because you need to move somebody from point A to point B, and also what is going to be the end result at the end of the day. The famous, what is in for me, for the client is very important. All right. Now, when these people come to meet you, or these businesses come to meet you, what challenges do you usually see that they face? This is the reason they have not really written the book before, because if they could do it on their own, they didn't need you. If they couldn't do it, meaning something was holding them back. What are these something that you learned from your experience?
So there's two things. The first one is that people come to me and they're not sure if they, as we talked earlier before, do they have a story worth sharing? They have no idea if they have enough to write a book. So they come to me to have a conversation to see, well, is what I've experienced and my area of expertise, is that enough? And so I help them to uncover their story and to show them you have way more to share than you think you have. So that's the one thing. On the other side of that is they have too many ideas. They could write about so many different things, and they just don't know, should I go this direction or this direction? I could write about this and that. And so I help them fine-tune their main theme and their core idea, and then I help them to weave all the other things in. Like, we're creating this tree, and there's a tree trunk that we need to establish what that is, and then from that there come the branches that reach out, and there can be the different sub themes and how we bring them in, because we have the major transformation that we're taking the reader through, and then each chapter has a mini transformation for the reader as well. So I help them build that out and make all of their many ideas fit into a cohesive whole.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, say this hypothetical client meet you, okay, an example, East Wide business, they want to write a book for their business. How do you know, or how do you help them to identify their key message and then refine them in the process, so that at the end of the day, they have a book that actually speak to their essence?
Yeah, so we do start with a void to value statement. That is the core to really help them to connect with themselves. And then through a series of questions, we identify really what lights them up the most, because quite often they could have this idea that this theme or this topic or that, and then really to identify what is the core message of the business is really what it's about. And I always say, follow your passion, because you're going to write this book for a little while. And when the going gets tough, and if you don't have passion to get you through, then it's easier to give up. Because the statistics of people quitting when they're writing a book is actually quite shocking. So I say find that thing that makes you passionate. And of course, then look at what is that problem that you're solving for the reader, and be really clear on doing the research on the reader as well. Like, who are they? What problem do they have? And how do you solve that problem that they have? And then I ask my clients also, once they are clear on their core message, to go on Amazon and to research what else is already out there. So then this then answers the question, what makes your book unique? What makes your book uniquely you? And often the answer already lies in their story. And by that point, when we've done all of this groundwork, it's so obvious what that uniqueness is, because from terror to trust, and the stories that are connected to that, for example, is a very unique story and quality that particular person will bring into teaching about leadership.
Thank you so much for that. That is really, really robust. All right. Now, where does that your service end? Do you just prepare the book, is published, that is where it ends? Or do you also take it on to, I don't know, do you do something more other than the book, from the idea that the people have in their head? Of course, you help them to clarify it, get it written, and it's printed. They have it as a physical copy, or of course, also the digital copy. Is that where your service ends, or there are more to it? Help me understand that.
Yes, so I help my clients to create a marketing plan for their launch, so that when they do launch it, they know exactly what they're doing and how they're using the book and how they're getting the book out there. Currently, I don't help them to organize book launches, not book launches, I'm sorry, to book tours, for example. I am not able to book them on a tour. But what I do is I help them connect with podcast hosts so that their message can get out there. And I do, certain things on Amazon so that their book can be found and stays up there for longer. So that's where it goes. But I'm not a PR agency that helps them get it all spread out there. That's something where I have some affiliates that can take care of that part.
All right, that's interesting. All right, now a business hear your story because they've listened to this podcast, or from every other thing that you have done there to put yourself out there, or they are interested, but they are discouraged because they say, okay, but we don't have all this, we don't have a lot of money to be able to do this, so we are not going to do that. So could you share something with us, like what does it cost to be able to have a book written with your service? More like, share with us.
So I'll just give you the big picture first. I know that a lot of hybrid publishers charge about $20,000, sometimes $50,000 to have the book written and published with them. I don't do it, like, it's not that expensive to work with me, because also I have this group program, but I do have some individual VIP one-on-one coaching as well, where I help people write the book if they want that. So typically, to get get my help to have it written and to have it published, and have to have the bestseller campaign and be really clear on how it fits into your business plan, and to have the launch campaign, it can all be done within 8 to 10K. And there, of course, because it goes over at least a year, they are payment plans, so it can be spread out. If they just want to do the solo book incubator, that's $2,500, and again, there's a payment plan, because I really want to make it affordable. And yes, it is an investment, absolutely. And I also believe it will give back so much, because you can raise your prices as a result of having a book. The visibility that comes from it, not just from the book, but from the opportunities that come when you have a book, like speaking opportunities, podcast opportunities, even TV and radio interviews. It's the opportunities are endless once you open your mind to that, and the embodiment of the message that comes from that, the increased confidence, will also magnetize more people to you. So it is an investment that really has the opportunity to have multiple fold returns.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Now, all this work that you do, Krystal, is there a way that your experience, you growing up, little you at the time, 12, 40 years, growing up, beginning to understand different things around you in Germany, could be influencing what you are doing today? When you look back, is there any way you can say that your experience as a child, as a young adolescent, influenced what you are doing today?
I think because I was alone so much and I was often on the outside looking in, I really developed an ability to observe and to recognize and read situations, read people. And I think that's really helping me now to help my clients to bring the best out of them, to see them in a way. I really feel I have developed this ability to see people. I have also been told that I'm an activator. So when I speak to my clients, they get so inspired and activated, especially healers. Channel all night, and they just their book suddenly gets written and it moves through them simply because we've had a conversation and because I've been able to spark and ignite something within them that helps them to get the clarity that they need to write the book with ease. And I think that comes from that ability to reflect and to think deeply, and that comes from that alone time.
You're an activator. Wow, that is beautiful. But what does that mean? Explain.
You know, when you meet people, so I'll give you the example. I had a session with a VIP client, and we talked about her story and what she wanted to write about. And I just reflected certain things back to her, and it inspired her so much that she was channeling all night. And so it activated her to connect to her guides, to connect to her essence, to her wisdom, and it just poured through her. So in that sense, I've heard this, and this is not just a one-off, this happens a lot, where people just feel that they get connected with themselves because I have the ability to see them in a very deep and profound way, that they can connect to that depth within themselves and then write from that place.
That is really lovely. That is really powerful. That is really powerful. And it's also from a business perspective, because you see, it's like what we were saying before, that when you tell your story, you help to trigger the I don't want to call it selfishness for the risk of not giving the wrong impression about it. But really, that is what you trigger in the people, that you trigger that their ego in them. In that you're talking about yourself, but you help them to understand themselves, so that you really are activating something in them that becomes useful for them. You see, I was doing audio room a couple of months ago. Now, one of the guests that I invited to speak, in the course of the conversation, somebody sent a message in the back end, and they made a contract right at that moment before the event ended, so that the person shared in the room that I've just secured a contract just now because I'm speaking here. And I also responded in the room. The room have not ended, in the audio room, that this is actually why we are here. We are not here, even though I'm the one that is organizing the event, we are not here because of me, for me, and only for me. We are here to serve. So this is what it's all about. The story is not just about the person who is telling it. The story is always an instrument to help people understand, to activate the power in them so that they can become more powerful. If we do that for more people, then we are successful now. We are fulfilled inside. Because the fulfillment is not just about, the story is all about me. Everybody must be about me. We are not gods. How are we able to do that? So I think it's had to be about the people.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, please go. Say something.
The first draft that a lot of the authors write, and I do a lot of multi-author books, so it's just a chapter. So the first draft that they write is, and I do say that to them, the first draft is about you just writing your story like a journal. You just writing about what is happening for you, what came up for you, what you felt, and really sharing from this real space of authenticity and vulnerability, because the vulnerability is a really key important point as well, because that then connects to the hearts of the readers. But yeah, initially the first draft is often extremely self-indulgent and selfish and very self-centered. And so once that first draft is out, it's almost like, it just has to get released and come out of the system. Then we can look at, okay, so now how can we use this story to serve the reader? And the way I do that is by teasing out the universal theme, and then help them to share, at each section of the story, then share about their reflections on that story, tease out the teaching points that relate to the readers as well and relate to their lives, so that they can see, oh, wow, yes, I had that moment too. Oh, wow, now I can see what happened to me here in a completely different way. So we're serving the reader by giving them realizations, by sharing deep insights that we've made, so that they can have those same insights and relate them to their own lives. So it's this two-part process. The first one, we must get our own story selfishly out. And then the second part is we're looking at it, how can it serve others?
Thank you so much for that. Talking about serving other, what about the healing process to the healing, even for the person that is writing? That as you are helping people to find themselves, to reflect on their life, you even become better. You become happier. That who is such a person that will not be happy knowing that you have helped somebody to be happy? And also, who is such a person who doesn't want to download the information you have upstairs? Now, this can even become very simple to understand now, because your brain have a hard drive, but that hard drive have a capacity that it can take. If you just put all the information there, at the point it's going to overload. You're going to overload what you are carrying in your head. That means if you are not sharing your experiences with people, it means you are carrying it. Because you cannot block your eyes from seeing. Everything you see is an information. There are pieces of information calculated, become gigabyte. All this information, you are putting it on your head. But when you share it with people, it means you are downloading the information. It means your brain is lighter now. So that writing a book is also freeing your space on your head. I don't know if you want to say something about that, like how writing book can also be helpful for us, for the writer self, for the writer that are writing the book. It can be helpful for us emotionally, healing wise, and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many examples for that. And so one lady comes to mind, and she is a dancer, and she does she teaches dancing for somatic release and releasing trauma out of the muscles in the body. And that was her medicine when she went through her healing journey. She used dance to heal herself, and she had had sexual abuse. And so there was a lot of stuff that just needed to come out of the muscles in her body. And so she shared that story of how she came into dancing and why she's now teaching dancing and why she's so passionate about that. And she said at the end of that writing process, she felt a lot lighter. She felt like she had released whatever burdens she was carrying and released her story back to the universe. And now it was part of the collective again, and she no longer had to carry it. So that's just one example of how this healing can happen that you're speaking of.
That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for this sharing. It really has been very, very interesting here. All right, now for people that want to connect with you, please share with them, how can they reach out to you?
So I'm active on Facebook and LinkedIn as Krystal Hille, which you see on the screen, Krystal, Hille with an E, Hille. And then my website is hillehouse.org.
All right, beautiful. Now, Krystal, we have spent a lot of time here talking about different things about you, from your background in Germany to where you are today in Australia. of course, and also what you do, writing, and also healing. We also talked something important for the demography here, which is about ancestral healing. So how would you like to conclude the conversation? What is the message you want to leave the people with? Please go ahead.
I think the message is that your story matters, you matter, and to encourage the listeners to really take time to reflect on your story, reflect on your journey, look at where you came from, what voids did you have in your life, and therefore what are the values that you now have. And if this conversation can help you to really have that belief that you have a story that is worth sharing, and you have a story that means something, because I always say, we are all part of the same oneness, but we have a unique expression, and everybody has a unique purpose and a unique expression in this world. And so to really claim that and own that, so that we can all step into our highest potential, because when we own our story, that's what we're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much, Krystal.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.